recognized.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank both of my colleagues from Texas for using this as an opportunity not only to herald this important bill, but the importance of health care for our veterans in South Texas. As a sponsor myself through several sessions of this effort to strengthen health care in South Texas, I'm pleased we're finally making some progress on it, and we need to continue to redouble our efforts, whether it is there or at Audie Murphy or at the Brooke Burns Center or at Lackland, or as with our success last Friday in Austin, Texas, where we broke ground on what will become the largest veterans outreach clinic to provide outpatient care for our veterans of any place in the entire United States. But of course, what brings us here today principally is the bill that Congressman Cuellar introduced and that I am a sponsor of to salute the veterans of Schertz, Texas by renaming this as the Schertz Veterans Post Office. With so many in the Schertz area who've contributed so much to our nation's freedom, there just aren't enough public buildings in Schertz to name all of them for the individual sacrifice that has occurred. And so this bill very practically approaches the heroism and the contribution of so many veterans and their families in Schertz by renaming this building the Veterans Post Office. Schertz's connection to our armed forces is a proud and storied history. Most of the community's growth began going back to a general store in the last century, in the 19th century, but it began in the 20s and 30s by the Army's construction of what was then called in Hollywood and elsewhere the West Point of the Air, within the Randolph Field, before the Air Force was even formed. And today, Randolph Field may be called Randolph Air Force Base, and Schertz, Texas may have had since 1990 a tripling of its population. But some things have not changed. And one of those since World War II, 1946, and the end of that war, as the veterans were returning, has been the chartering and the continuation of the Veterans of Foreign War Post commanded by Mike Espinola. It is still a thriving heartbeat of community activities. And families are also still coming to Schertz, Texas. They're coming in droves because even CNN recognized it as one of the best places to live anywhere in America. So often, rapid change will divide rather than unite. And that can be especially true when you have people coming from literally all over the world in a community practically adjacent to a military base and otherwise filled with many commuters. But unlike so many other parts of our country, where folks return to the same street without a sense of neighborhood, the people in Schertz have maintained a community spirit that is reflected at the Schertz Family YWCA that recently got the Strong Community Award, at Pickerel Park, or at a football game at Samuel Clemens High School. This renamed Veterans Post Office will help maintain that community spirit and serve as an anchor and as a reminder of where Schertz came from, how it has grown, and the road ahead. A while back, I stood at this very microphone to speak up for the renaming of a post office in South Austin on South Congress, the street that once connected San Antonio and Austin, for Sergeant Henry Ibarra III, who was killed in Iraq. I remember the dedication service that we had there, joined by the Catholic War veterans, the American GI Forum, LULAC, the Knights of Columbus, in addition to the family and friends of Sergeant Ibarra. It meant a great deal to them. And I believe that the same thing, the same kind of inspiration, which they feel every time they go into that hub of community activity, will be realized as well in Schertz, Texas. Our veterans, whether they wore a uniform last week or decades ago, understand a fundamental truth. Our military is the strongest in the world because of the spirit and the bravery of the men and women who put on that uniform. And as a grateful nation, we must continue to honor their service by meeting their health care needs and by taking steps like today in the renaming of this Schertz Veterans Post Office. I think it's a step in the right direction. I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas reserves the balance of his time.
Speaker, I'd like to reclaim my time. I want to thank the gentleman from Texas, my good friend, my colleague, Mr. Lloyd Doggett, for his dedication, his passion, his commitment to the veterans. For many years, he's been supporting the veterans, has worked very hard. If there's anybody that works very hard for the veterans, it is my friend, Mr. Lloyd Doggett. I certainly want to thank you for co-sponsoring this legislation. At this